But Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. 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 You'll float too.
Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about the movie It. Sit back, relax, and let's get at it.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. You got it all. Tune in, turn up, come vibe with us, y'all. So remember.
1988, 12-year-old Bill Denborough makes a paper sailboat for Georgie, his 6-year-old brother. Georgie sails the boat along the rainy streets of a small town in Derry, Maine, only to have it fall down a storm drain as he attempts to retrieve it. Georgie then sees a clown in the drain who introduces himself as Pennywise, the dancing clown. Enticing Georgie to come closer, Pennywise bites his arm off and drags him into the sewer. What do you think about that, Brent? How's that for an opening?
Guys, the opening for It, I think, is perfect. So before we start, I just wanted to say the book, the book, is my favorite book of all time. It's just a fantastic book. And this opening sets the tone. It's like 75 pages, so it goes a lot more into detail than what the movie does. But you're talking about, if you don't know what this movie is, if you don't know the story, perfect intro. You got two brothers. You have the cute kind of coming of age thing. You can pick that up from the intro because they're kind of making fun of each other. It's supposed to be relatable. You've got I like how he names the boat, and Bill is trying to tell Georgie that you call boats she and her because that's just what they do. And you go down into the basement and you're getting freaked out because you're kids and it's dark and you don't know what's down there. And Georgie starts selling his little boat outside in the rain. As soon as it goes down the drain and you see Pennywise come up out of the sewer, that gives people nightmares even today. I mean, people are afraid to walk by storm drains today because of that scene. And, I mean, the famous line, Georgie, we all float down here, or come down here, you'll float too, we all float down here. That is one of the most famous. I have the bookmark that I use has that quote on it. Dad got it for me for Christmas. It's just a famous quote. It really sets the stage, and you because you know it's a coming of age story because of the first part. You know it's going to be a horror book and movie because of the sewer drain, because of Pennywise, and you have the intro to Pennywise, the dancing clown, who, in my opinion, is one of the greatest horror movie villains of all time. I mean, Pennywise is just fantastic to me. I love that opening scene.
Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. And this scene was so well shot too. Just the rain, the way they had the environment set up. And when you first encounter Pennywise, you see those menacing eyes just come out of the shadows.
Yeah, no
Man, the
doubt.
first time I saw that in the theater, I had chills, dude.
When was the original one made? 1990, something like that?
1990.
I think so, the miniseries.
You know,
yeah.
I'm going to play you guys something here real quick, and it breaks down that scene in the 1990 version and the 2017 version. So I'm going to play this real quick. You guys listen to it and tell me what you think, how much better you think than which one you think's better, in other words. Let's check it out.
Hi, Georgie.
Till it's too late.
Here. Take it.
That's a big difference. That's how much better I think
Huge
the
difference.
2017 version is from the 1990 version. It's just night and day better, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
Yes. And you start to see like Pennywise in this scene, he's kind of toying around with Georgie and talking about, the carnival foods and whatnot. But then you just kind of there's like a maybe like 5 second pause or maybe like 5 to 10 second pause that Pennywise does in the scene where he just stares at Georgie and you're just like, what is this guy about to do? And then of course you see his face. You see his face and see his mouth go over. It was crazy.
So one of the things about the 1990 version, and I understand that it's probably going to be a generational thing as far as what people like or which version that people like better. But a lot of people would see the 1990 version and go, man, that it was corny. It was kind of silly. It was campy almost. It wasn't really scary. But what you have to remember is the 1990 version was a made-for-TV miniseries
Two different things, yeah.
Yeah, that aired on like ABC or NBC or something. Like they couldn't cuss, they couldn't make any kind of sexual references. They were very, very much restricted with what they could do. So as far as playing Pennywise the clown, I'm a huge Tim Curry fan, and I think that Tim Curry knocked it out of the park. Now, having said that, I do think that Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 ended up being a better, film or movie than what the 1990 version did, but they weren't like restricted with all the stuff. Like I can't tell you how many F-bombs that Richie Tozier dropped just himself, just Richie. You know what I mean? And that's when they were kids. That's kids saying it. So when we compare, I really want to remind everybody, the 1990 version was a made-for-TV miniseries that had a whole lot of restrictions. Based off of that, if they could go full throttle like Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 did, I think that you would have gotten a much different movie.
And they were probably limited with their budget back then too.
Yeah, it probably didn't have much, half the budget, or it probably didn't have 10% of the budget is what this movie did.
Yeah, there's a lot more you can do with that hard R rating than you can ever do on a made-for-TV show. That's for sure. But you know what? One of the things that I love about this movie is it reminds me of a lot of another Stephen King story, that he came out with called Stand By Me. It's kind of a coming-of-age story where you follow what are they called, the Losers Crew or something like that?
Losers Club.
Losers Club, yeah. You follow them around and you get to experience what they experience with Pennywise while they're children. But then you get to come and experience what they experience in part 2 when they're adults. And I think that's one of the main draws of this movie is that, you can't go wrong with a good coming of age movie. What's your guys' take on that? And how do you think the characters they did with the casting of the characters in the new movie compared, to what was in the book and stuff like that? How do you think they did? Go ahead, man.
Yeah, this is why it is my favorite book. And I think the movie does it perfectly. I think Corky summed it up perfectly. It is like a horror version of Stand By Me.
Yes.
Or if you got the books, The Body. It's a horror version of that. It's a perfect coming of age story because the Losers Club they're so relatable. And, before we leave, we have to talk about who our favorite member of the Losers Club is. Mine is
sure.
Ben, because I'm the chubby kid. But the Losers Club is so relatable, regardless of if you didn't feel like an outcast or not. Everyone can kind of relate in some way of feeling like an outcast sometimes. And the Losers Club, Stephen King does a fantastic job at writing people that feel like an outcast.
And there's no doubt about it.
And then you have that in their whole coming of age stories, and then you add in a killer clown. I mean, it's fantastic. And one thing I wanted to bring up in the book, the kids is set, like the kids timeline is set in the 50s, the 1950s. The adult timeline is set in the 1980s. In the movie, the kids section is, or the kids timeline is set in the 1980s, and the adult timeline is set in like the 2010s or whatever. And one thing that I think is they should have followed the book, in my opinion. I think the 1950s and the 1980s are the two most iconic decades in American history. I think it would have been pretty nostalgic to set the kids in the 1950s, and then Henry Bowers, he could have been a greaser, which is what he was supposed to be in the book. He's a greaser. He could have had that timeline. I mean, I think it would have been great. What's your guys' thoughts about that?
Well,
I actually
go ahead, buddy.
Actually,
Then I'll chime in on this one here in a second. Go ahead, though.
okay, so I want to disagree just a little bit. I actually liked that they set the chapter 1 in the 1980s and then chapter 2 in the 2000s. I think that it worked well, and I think that it was almost like, you know, how Hollywood does all these remakes and reimaginings and reboots and everything now, and so they try to make everything more current, and I think that's what they did, is they made it a lot more current. Now, I will say this. So even though I like the fact that they said it in the 80s and then the 2000s, I think that they missed an opportunity from using Christine, because whenever Henry Bowers gets broken out of the mental institution that he was in, he actually gets picked up by Christine.
Really?
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, he gets picked up, and that would be in part 2 of the movie. It's when they're adults, but we'll talk more about that next week.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I didn't know that.
And the
But
reason,
Corky Morgan-
one of the main reasons why I like that is because I like it when you start crossing over stuff. There's been other Stephen King movies that have come out, like the new Pet Cemetery that come out, and John Lithgow plays Judd, and in the background at this kind of get together that they're having, Judd is talking about the events of Cujo, and he mentions the Saint Bernard. He mentions Christine. He mentions something else. And so whenever you have these kind of little Easter egg tie-ins with these other movies, that's what I really think is cool. So, you know, as much as I liked the kids being set in the 80s, and I'll tell you one really cool thing is Richie Tozier is in the like the movie theater, and he's playing a video game. He's actually playing Street Fighter 2. And that's very relatable to me, because Street Fighter 2 was big whenever I was a kid. And so I just thought that was cool. But go ahead, Corky. You chime in on it.
Oh, I feel the same way. I'm a child of the 80s, man, and I grew up in the 80s. And, you know, they compare this, you know, this movie to, they say that they kind of ripped off Stranger Things, and I love Stranger Things because it's set in the 80s. And, you know, I'm just probably biased. Don't get me wrong. I love the 50s as well. I think that was an awesome decade. But, you know, the 80s will always hold a special place in my heart. So I love any movie that goes back and sets the scene in that time period. I love it to death. And that's one of the reasons I love this movie as much as I do, because, you know, I can look back in my childhood a little bit and see a lot of me in some of these characters and stuff like that, because we had some crazy stuff like that go on. We didn't have no clowns chasing us, but, you know, we thought we had some stuff chasing us from time to time growing up. But
hey, you never know if you had any clowns chasing you. Hey, Pennywise could have been right on your tail. You would have had no idea.
yeah, you never know, man. But you know, one scene that stands out in this movie is the bullying, and the bullying of Ben, because I can relate to Ben. I was always the chubby kid, and I'm the chubby adult now. You know what I'm saying? But You know, there was some vicious bullying in this movie, and they were going to carve something into his stomach at one point, and I thought, man, that's just brutal. That takes bullying to another level. Brent, what do you think
Yeah, it
about
was an
that, buddy?
H, I believe. Henry's
They were,
name.
yeah, like Kate said, Henry was going to carve his name into Ben's stomach, which I think is like, if you really think about that, that's like insane. That is insane type of bullying.
Yeah, that's
Oh yeah,
that's a little over the top bullying there. That goes into assault, in my opinion.
and when it happened, because this has been coming off of his first encounter with Pennywise in the library, which
Yeah.
which that scene was so awesome in the movie. I'm sure you guys have probably noticed this, but whenever Ben gets in the library and he's starting to read through the books, you can tell something's off. And if you notice in the background at one point, he's reading the book and he's going over some of the history of Pennywise. There's this old lady in the background that's just staring at him and smiling. So I noticed that last night. I knew it was coming, but I saw that and that just gave me chills, man. That freaked me out.
I really like the bullying aspect of it too, because everybody, when they're kids, experiences some kind of bullying. Okay. And I know that it was extreme for Henry Bowers to be trying to carve his name into Ben's stomach. But me and Corky went to Inglewood School in the late 80s and early 90s, and there was straight up more than one kid that would definitely carve their initials into your stomach. They ain't no playing about that.
Yeah,
So,
there's no doubt about that, man.
We went to school with some rough people.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you guys this, because I was thinking about this last night. The movie starts. It goes a year after the death of Georgie, but then we get introduced to the cast. But we also start to see everyone's first encounter with Pennywise. Of course, you see Mike. He sees the burnt corpses, and I believe that that one building. I don't know if it was like a butcher's. I can't remember the name of the building, but he sees all the corpses, kind of like showing his past. Yeah, slaughterhouse, that was the word. And of course, Ben, he goes through it at the library. But out of all of the first encounters, who do you guys think had like the creepiest, and who had it the worst? Because a few of them got away pretty quickly, but I feel like some of them, I mean, especially the kid that was in the church and the painting came alive. I mean, that was super creepy. That was Stanley that happened to.
Dude, it has to be Eddie, the guy that the leper chased. I mean,
that's what
Eddie
I was going to say.
Eddie is already a germaphobe, and he doesn't know if it's real or not. Well, I guess when he saw it the first time, he has to think it is real. Just some random leper that climbs out of the basement of this creepy looking house. I mean, in the book, I know I keep talking about the book a lot, and we're not talking about the book, we're talking about the movie. But in the book, it's a lot more graphic and a lot more disturbing. He goes into detail about what the guy was saying.
It was super gross.
He was not saying, "Hey, Eddie, it's time to take your medicine." He was saying something else.
Well, here's the freaky part about the Eddie situation is Eddie was by himself in front of the house that they all eventually had to enter and get down into the well and everything towards the end of the movie. Eddie was already having to walk by that place.
Right.
By himself. Yeah. He didn't have his buddies with him. He didn't have backup. So he was by himself. And not only did the leper chase him, what he could have done was stuck to the road and run around the road and went on. The leper chased him into the yard of that house and chased him all the way through the backyard before he got away through the chain link fence. And if the chain link fence didn't have a hole in it, he was stuck back there with it because, Pennywise was actually standing in the backyard. Like,
it was super creepy with all the balloons.
So it's kind of like,
and Eddie's the first person that's seen Pennywise like full figure. Yeah. I know that Georgie saw Pennywise, and let's see, what's his the other kid with the slaughterhouse.
I think Mike just saw him hanging up by the hooks.
Mike,
and it
was
was
talking about Mike.
But Mike, yeah. But Eddie, he was the first person that Pennywise actually he saw him and he kind of chases him, and
Well,
that would be very very creepy.
So with as scary as what everybody else had it, okay. Um, you look at Stanley, and a thing come out of the picture and chased him for about 30, not even 30 seconds, about 3 seconds, and he was on his own home turf in his dad's office. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So with as scary as what that scene was, he was still on his own home turf. Eddie was he was very much in its home turf. You know what I mean? Like
He was very susceptible to getting
I
killed there.
remember when I was a kid, I'd be over at one of my buddies' houses, and you get to playing, and it gets late or whatever. And now you always try to make it home while it was still daylight, because if you didn't, you had to make it home by yourself in the dark. And when you ain't got no flashlight, and it's 1989 or 1990, and you're on foot walking up a deserted road, in Inglewood, it was full of deserted roads. It ain't like it is now, where there's all kinds of people. People went to bed back then, You're having to make it home on a deserted road, or you might only see one or two cars the whole time, or you're on a bicycle. You ain't got no flashlight. So, Eddie being in its home turf, I thought was creepy enough anyway. And I'll go ahead and I'll tell you this. They were doing a montage of what everybody was doing, and it was after Eddie broke his arm, and Eddie's mom come and got him and all that, and everybody got in trouble. But they were doing a montage, and it showed what everybody was doing. And Eddie actually went back to that house and got his little what they call them, the little bags with all the medicine and
I
around
gotcha.
your waist or whatever. I can't remember. Fanny pack.
Fanny pack.
It actually showed Eddie having gone back to the house, or in the road right in front of the house, and retrieved his fanny pack on his own. So how many people, after having experienced everything that they had done, would have done that? Because they had already went in the house once and experienced everything that they experienced with it. And Eddie went back to the house by himself, right outside of it, where he got chased by the leper. Whenever him and his friends went in, he got his arm broke and everything. And he went back and he got his fanny pack. So Eddie gets my vote for being the bravest out of the Losers Club. That's
that
100%.
was probably just because he was such a hypochondriac that he thought he had to have that medicine or something.
He's freaking out. Yeah.
Was going to happen to him.
He had to go get his placebos, man.
Yeah.
Gazebo. Had to get his gazebo.
His gazebo.
Yeah. They call
His
them
gazebo.
gazebos.
This may be a good time to ask you guys. I already said Ben was my favorite of the Losers Club. Who was your guys' favorite of the Losers Club?
Since
we'll start with you.
Yeah, since you've already chose Ben here, I thought Billy was really cool. I thought how he was able to kind of come out of his shell with it, especially with his stutter and everything. You kind of see him become the leader of the group. I thought that was super cool. And kind of related to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the first encounters with Pennywise. When Billy has his encounter in their house, I really enjoyed that scene because he actually picks up the turtle. That we, can discuss here in a little bit, kind of going into the lore of Pennywise. But yeah, I think that Billy's probably got my vote there. I think that seeing him at the end of the movie get courage and kind of deal with the loss of his brother and everything, I thought that was super, super cool to see.
Right. Now, if you're going to ask me my favorite character, it's got to be Ben. I know Brent already picked Ben, but, it's got to be Ben for me just because I relate so much to him, I think I can relate to Ben a lot, so he's got to be my favorite character. Daniel, what do you think? Who do you relate to the most?
I relate to Richie the most. Richie always had a snappy comeback. Like him and Eddie was always going back and forth with each other. That reminds me of me and some of my buddies, from school or even at work. I've got some work friends that I'm always cracking on and I'm busting on, and I've always got some kind of something witty to say. So Richie 100% relates to me the most, and I really like his character.
So
And I'll say this too, going back to Ben one last time real quick, is one of the best lines comes from Ben, and that's the haiku that he writes for Bev.
Yeah, the poem. Yeah, the
It's,
embers.
January, your hair is winter fire. January embers. My heart burns there too.
Man, my heart
And
burns
is-
there too.
Yeah,
that is
he's a killer. He's a killer for
hey,
sure,
I'll
man.
tell you what, since you brought up Beverly, let's get into this for a minute. So Beverly, obviously, she's got problems out of her dad. I think it's insinuated that she's probably maybe molested by him and stuff like that. But what is the deal with Stephen King and all these fetishes he puts in his books, man? What do you guys take on that? It seems like Stephen King may have some issues when it comes to, sexuality and stuff like that, because he puts a lot of it in his books, and there ain't none of it he puts in his books normal. Let's put it that way, because I told you guys last week when we discussed The Shining that there was a plot that people think that maybe, there was some incest going on there, and now, it's going on in this book. We know that. So what do you guys think? What's up with Stephen King? Do you think he's got, little issues on the side, or is this just his dark sense of humor when he writes?
Well, I know from my take, I know that there's different fan theories and stuff, and I know from different books, some of that goes on, and I've tried to read it a couple of times when I was a teenager, and I always got so far, but I always give up on it, and it was because of the sheer size of the book. And
Right.
I always regretted not, going ahead and finishing the book. And that's one of the books that I have, told myself, I'm gonna read this book this year. But having said that, I've also read his sort of like an autobiography. It's called On Writing. Stephen King wrote about his own childhood and whatnot. And I've seen different interviews and read different snippets of different things over the years. And there's nothing really to me that comes across that he has any kind of issues like that. Now, Brent, you've read all of Stephen King's works from start to finish. You've read every book that he's ever done. So you would be the person to ask. But I haven't ever seen like the quote quote screwed up side, from the incestual or child molestation or anything like that from Stephen King. What's your take on that, Brent?
Yeah. So I've read all of his books. I think it's important to say to start that when he wrote his first half of all of his books, he started writing in like 1974 with Carrie. And up until like 1985, he was on drugs and he was an alcoholic. So, like, to the point to where he doesn't even remember writing Cujo. Like, that's how bad it was. And
Dang.
so when he wrote a lot of these books, he was very, very, very graphic with his sex scenes, and he wrote a lot of books that had children as the protagonist. And so, yeah, in that case, it doesn't look good. In this book, in particular, there is a very graphic sex scene that, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it or not, but it's a graphic scene. It's a scene that I don't like in the book. It's a scene that I'm sure Stephen King wouldn't like in the book. But when he wrote it, he was high and he was drunk all the time. And I will say, after he got sober, he doesn't take any drugs now and he doesn't drink any alcohol now. His sex scenes have really calmed down. He doesn't have any of that. He still has sex scenes in his books, but they're not like what it was when he was writing it and like The Shining and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
he also does a lot to do with homosexuality, man, because I told you guys about the Jack reading the Playgirl magazine in the last episode, and I know in chapter 2 here, there's I think the first scene of the movie deals with some homosexuals getting taken out or something like that. So he's definitely writes about some taboo stuff. Let's just put it that way.
But I will say, as far as I didn't catch any of this when I was reading his books, I didn't catch any except for that one scene in It. There was nothing else that was graphic like that. You may be able to allude to certain things in the book. He never says that Bev was going through that situation with her dad. It said that he physically abused her for sure, like he beat her, but it never it alludes to it, but it doesn't have any scenes in it. So it's not really graphic.
I think he just alludes to it. It never shows anything like that, but you put 2 and 2 together, so it's pretty much insinuated that it's going on.
I think that's what makes it scarier, because
but that's real. You're right. That's real.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to put it black and white like that. You start reading between the lines, and you start going, "Oh man, what is Bev going through that he's not telling us?"
Right.
What is, while he's over here talking about Eddie and Richie and Bill, and what they're going through, and Mike Hanlon, what's Bev, going through that he's not showing us, that he's not telling us. And our minds are the ones that gets, carried away with us. Our minds really get a lot darker than what we want, especially with our imaginations and stuff. And so then that's what makes the book even that much better, or at least it does in my opinion. They say less is more. You have to paint the picture, and you have to paint the picture in a way to get the mind working. But once you get the mind working, people's imagination fills in all the blanks that you can't on paper.
And I think that's what he does well with with this movie, because you take this group of kids, the Losers Club, and who couldn't relate to at least one of these kids, right? And then the stuff they're going through. And I think that's why Stranger Things is such a popular show. That's why Stand By Me was such a great movie. And that's why this movie we're doing tonight, It, is such a great movie, because everybody likes to watch these coming of age, type stories like that. But, Cade, you've been awful quiet tonight, and you guys have mentioned this turtle. I really don't know what you guys are talking about, so please, somebody fill me in on this turtle subject.
Yeah. So you find out throughout the movie, that Pennywise is definitely much more than just a clown, just a guy dressed up as a clown killing people. That he feeds off of fear of these children, and that's pretty much his source of food to keep him going. Actually, her going, because Pennywise is actually a female.
What?
Yes. So Pennywise is actually a being known as the Deadlights, and Brent knows way more about this than me, but I figured I'd go ahead and start it off.
Well, somebody's got to fill me in now that Pennywise is a girl. I got to know about this.
And at the beginning of the whole entire universe, this universe known as the macro universe existed, and this being, I think, maybe known as the Other, created the turtle, and then he also created Pennywise, or the Deadlights. And so what we see in It is, I think, a version or a being that possesses powers related to the Deadlights, and maybe some million or billion years ago crash landed on Earth at the quarry that you see in the movie, because I think it sensed a sense of fear from the planet Earth or something like that. And so really it's a lot more in depth than kind of what the movie alludes to. And I bet the book maybe goes more in depth with it. But Brent, do you care to fill in some of the gaps here? Because I know you can start getting really deep, especially with the Dark Tower.
So I know that Brent's about to get into the Dark Tower. And I know just enough about the Dark Tower to get me in trouble.
All right.
But what I do know is that It is supposed to be one of the, if you want to call him a boss, video game ties here, It would be a boss. And the Dark Tower has so many levels. It's got like 6 or 7 different levels, and it, or Pennywise, is a boss in one of them levels. So, Brent, I know that you're going to get into it, but am I right in thinking that it is not the supreme being? It is a lesser being to another higher power in the Dark Tower. Am I correct?
You're correct, but I mean, there's some. The Dark Tower goes really deep, so I probably wouldn't talk about the levels because that would take a long time to get into. But yes, you're correct. You're correct. Pennywise is not the Pennywise is definitely not the highest dark power. Pennywise is like the Deadlights would be just another great being in this universe.
He's kind of like a mid-level boss, sort of.
Yeah, but remember what Cade said. Pennywise is a female. The Deadlights is a female because
I can't believe that, man.
Yep.
Pennywise is pregnant. And
Yeah.
Pennywise, at the end
And
of
I
the
don't,
book,
and I don't know who knocked her up because there's some
That's
jacked
what I'm
up
saying.
people.
Who's
Okay,
Baby Daddy,
knocked up
man?
Pennywise, golly boom!
Pennywise.
Y'all are blowing my mind tonight. I didn't realize that Pennywise was a chick, dude.
So,
Yeah,
Brent,
I'm
Brent,
gonna
correct me
go
if I'm
home and
wrong
think
here.
about this, man.
but the everything in the universe, in Stephen King's universe, like the people, the characters, the whole every planet, everything was all because the turtle threw up and spawned the whole entire universe, right?
Well,
Oh my God.
I mean,
yeah,
we could
leave it to a turtle to puke and make.
It's
you
li-
right.
Was
It's
his
something
name
like that.
Michelangelo, at least. I mean,
Matron.
Yeah.
Matron. But I mean, we could do a whole episode on the Dark Tower. But the Dark Tower, the reason the turtle is big in this particular book is because we're on the pathway of the beam. The pathway of the turtle. I mean, and that's the beam of the turtle. So the Dark Tower is held up by some beam. I think it's 8 beams. It could be 6 beams, but it's held up by beams. And there's the turtle, the wolf, the lion. I mean, there's different animals for each, and you have to kill that particular guardian, and they're called a guardian. You have to kill that guardian to get through the portal into that beam. If that makes any sense. So
It's insane how in depth actually it is.
You said that the turtle is the guardian.
the turtle would be the guardian of that, yeah.
So-
And in the book, it doesn't go into this at all in the movie. But the deadlights, whenever Pennywise opens its mouth and you see the 3 lights, that's the deadlights.
Yep.
And when you go into the deadlights, like Bill, he's in the book, he is by far the leader of the group. And Bill sacrifices himself to jump into the deadlights to try to rescue one of his friends. And when he's going through, it's like you're going through space, and he sees the turtle. And the turtle is the guardian. It's kind of like the god of that universe. And it speaks to you, and it's like, trust in the turtle. The turtle is helping, is helping the kids make decisions, because there's a constant battle between the turtle and the deadlights, being Pennywise.
So see,
And-
at this point, Bill jumps in, right? I am now imagining Finding Nemo, and I see Crush. And
It's
Crush
the
is
same.
coming through, and he's like, "What's up,
It is kind
dude? Yeah."
except it's dark, so you're just going through. But when they're adults and the same thing happens, he's flying through, he sees the turtle, but the turtle's dead. And that's when he knows that, oh crap, something is screwed up.
All right.
Yep.
So
And,
who killed the turtle?
We don't know, but it makes sense if you're a Dark Tower fan. It makes sense who probably
Man,
killed the turtle.
so I thought the whole time that the turtle lived. You telling me that somebody killed the turtle?
Well, I don't want to get too. I don't want to
That's-
spoil it if you guys are going to read it.
So Pennywise
Man,
is
that
a girl,
sucks.
and now we got a dead turtle on our hands. Dang
That
it, man!
sucks,
What happened?
man.
Yeah.
I was always a
Let me
fan
get to
of the turtle.
Well, wait a second. Let me get into the to the female of Pennywise. Okay.
Oh yeah, please
Pennywise,
do.
Pennywise is a female, and on Earth, her real form is not a clown; it's a spider.
Right.
Yep.
And so, the last scene of the book, she scurries off and she lays all of her eggs. And it says that the room is really dark, and they try stepping on these on the eggs, but the sewer is starting to crumble.
Blood. Yep.
And they don't know if they got all of the eggs or not. And so that's how it kind of leads into they definitely didn't get all the eggs. So
Yeah.
Pennywise is still out there, and there's going to be multiple Pennywises.
So I think that Ben may have said in the book that he tried and stomped like maybe 100 of them, but he said he wasn't sure he got all of them. But, you know, it's kind of stated and, you know, kind of seems like Pennywise is dead. But if I'm not mistaken, in one of the other books, in I think Dreamcatcher, what I have in my notes here, the town of Derry, this is after the events of it, there's a sign and there's graffiti on there saying that Pennywise lives.
It says Pennywise lives, and that is one of the best. That is one of the best.
It's the coolest. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the best because it's Dreamcatcher is about hunters that go to a hunting lodge in Maine, and then on their way they stop by Derry, and they have a plaque of the old water tower. And I don't know if this shows in the second part of the movie or not. I guess we could talk about it next week.
Yeah.
But that water tower collapses, and that's how the town floods. And they have a plaque, and on the plaque, someone had graffitied "Pennywise lives." Wow. And you guys can tell me.
It's insane.
You're not telling me. If you read that, your mouth would just be like, "What?"
Like the biggest oh crap moment ever.
Wow.
But you could actually talk about the interconnected universe for, like Brent's saying, for a long time. I did not realize
it was this deep. You guys are expanding my mind today.
It's I think it's super cool because, you know, it makes you want to go. I'm actually going to go try and read some of these books now just to try to see if I can spot the Easter eggs a little bit.
I'm going to try to read it myself because I've never read the book.
Some of the ways it connects, like Dad mentioned, so Henry Bowers in this movie, you know, he kills his dad. Okay, well, Henry Bowers gets taken to an insane asylum. So, you know, Pennywise had possessed Henry to kill his dad. That's why he killed his dad. He got possessed after the balloon opened up and so he's possessed by Pennywise. Well, he kind of gets out of that, but then once Pennywise comes back in the second half, he becomes possessed again, and he doesn't know how to escape. And in the book, Christine rolls up, and that's his escape ride is Christine. So I love the way that it's all connected.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I never knew that. That's just awesome, dude. But I tell you guys what, before we break down the end of this movie, every week we try to do something that's a little fun, and Daniel always has some trivia questions. He tries to get past us to, see what our knowledge is on some stuff. So at this time, we'll just start up our trivia game, Daniel. So kick it off to us. Let's see who wins this week. You're muted.
You're muted, Daniel.
Sorry about that, guys.
It's Corky last week.
What I was saying is I give you some trivia questions. So we'll start with the easy one, and we'll go with what was Georgie chasing right before he was killed?
Paper boat.
His boat.
Paper boat. Paper boat is correct. Okay, so now.
Sound effects.
We get the sound effects. All right, let's see. Let's go with the next easiest one. We'll say, what is Richie Tozier's greatest fear?
Clowns.
Clowns
is the answer. So,
clowns it is.
All right. Now we got, where does Ben Haskam spend most of his time as a kid?
At the library.
Library.
At the library is correct, man. Give that to Corky.
I think I'm winning for a change.
Down. We got 3 down. We got 2 more to go. All right. So the next question is, why does Bill Denborough, I'm sorry, I said Ben. It's Bill. Why does Bill Denborough feel such remorse for Georgie dying?
Because he made him the paper boat.
No.
Yeah.
And he was sick, and he couldn't go out with him.
Yep.
Well, in It Chapter 1, or actually in It Chapter 2. I guess I'm cheating a little bit because it's supposed to just be It Chapter 1. But
I didn't watch that one.
he has so much remorse because he actually faked being sick.
Oh, what a prick!
I didn't. I forgot about that. I forgot about that.
Oh, nice job, Dad. You just spoiled.
Spoil. Sorry, audience.
All right, now here's one. Here's one. We'll give you another easy one. Okay. What year was It Chapter 1 set in? And we'll go with the year. It's got to be the specific year after Georgie was killed. What
1988.
year?
1989.
I give it to Cade. It's 1989. Georgie was killed in 88, and then there's a year that goes by.
Rip out my
All right, so-
eyes for not seeing the truth.
Oh yeah. Now, I always give like 5 normal questions, and then I'll give like a bonus question. So this
All right.
bonus question here, it does relate with It Chapter 1. You had to keep your eyes peeled during it, but I think that it's super cool. Okay. Now, Corky, you might get this a little bit easier, or you might understand it a little bit easier because you're a little bit older. But
Yeah, I got this.
in different scenes of It Chapter 1, they show a movie theater.
Oh
That
crap!
movie theater has different movies that were playing, and it is time period specific. Give me 3 movies that it
I got
showed
it.
in the background.
I know
where it was
Lethal
playing.
Weapon 2 was one of them.
Okay, it's 1989 Batman,
Yes.
Lethal Weapon 2, and Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Boom!
Yep.
Cade is all over it tonight, baby. He got
Oh,
it.
man.
He got it.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, I knew that Daniel was going to ask this.
Let's go.
And
Kid.
I didn't know he didn't tell me, but I made a voice recording on my phone, like, remember the Batman,
listen to this
Lethal
guy.
Weapon 2.
And I
He
think
was
that gives you
prepared
the win for the
tonight.
trivia, Cade.
Cade was
All right, I
prepared
got something
tonight.
I want to add tonight, guys. And we'll start
I'm an
doing this
80s
every
kid.
week. I'm going to play a scene from a movie. More than likely, it's going to be a death scene from a movie, because we love horror movies so much. And I want to see who can, without being able to see this, just based off the sound, I need to know what movie it is, who's the killer, and who's getting killed, okay? So
I'm
here it is.
screwed.
Don't answer until it all plays out. You ready? Here
Do
we
it.
go. All right, there you go. What Ian's got?
Man, that was pretty bad sound quality right there. I could hardly hear what's going on.
Sounded good on my end.
Ooh, I can barely hear what's going on. Aha! Can I hear it again?
I know what movie it is.
Sure, you can hear it
What,
again.
can I guess what movie it is?
Hold on, let's play it one more time.
Hold
Okay.
up, let's play it one more time.
All right, you ready?
So
All right, what you got?
I got it. Brent, you go first.
I don't know who the person.
First off,
that-
what are you wanting? What are you wanting, Corky?
I wanna
wanting
know
the name of the
movie.
movie.
The movie, the victim, and the killer.
I got it.
I have no clue.
Go ahead, Brent.
So I'm pretty sure it's Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger. I don't know who the person that got killed was.
That
but-
was gonna be my guess, but I don't know who the heck
I
gets
got it.
killed.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, I'm gonna say it's Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. It's gonna be Freddy Krueger doing the killing, and it's gonna be Tina that gets it.
Wrong on everybody's account.
Oh man!
Oh my gosh!
That was Nightmare on Elm Street 3. That was Freddy killing Nancy.
Oh, okay, that's an iconic
Yes.
scene.
So everybody gets a big goose egg on that one this week. We'll try again next week and see if you guys can get it.
Daniel was so sure too.
Man, I was so close.
Yeah,
That was
you
a good
guys-
guess,
I
though.
figured you guys would get Freddy, but I figured it would be hard for you to get, the whoever it was he was killing. But Got to do better next time, guys.
So
We'll try it again
I
next
was
week.
thinking it could have been Nightmare on Elm Street 3,
Seen that movie.
but I was just like, no, man, he's going to go with one. He's going to go with one. I know.
I don't remember that movie at all. I don't remember that one. Like,
All
We
right.
have to review the movie because I've never seen it.
All right, that's pretty fun, man. We'll try to do that at least every week, man.
Yeah, man,
I
that
think
was
that's real
fun.
fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
So back to it. So, you know, all the kids get together. They're down in the sewer. They're going to confront take on Pennywise for the final time. They walk into a big room. You got kids floating everywhere. Brent, let's hear it. What's your take? What are we going through when we see what do you think's happening when they see all these kids floating there?
Well, this is where the book and the movie kind of differ. I think in the movie, the kids floating, it's saying that Pennywise has taken their souls and that the kids are still dead. But it does add in. I mean, it explains why Pennywise keeps saying we all float down here. That makes sense whenever you see all the kids. And I do love the scene with when Bev is down there and the little Jack in the Box starts playing, and then the carnival gate opens, and you see Pennywise, the dancing clown. Like, I do love that scene. But yeah,
That's a hilarious scene.
it is a hilarious scene, but I like it.
It's cool.
But yeah, I would say that the kids floating is probably representing that Pennywise has taken their souls and that they're all dead. But that's kind of his bounty that he's taken to gather strength for his hibernation, his 27-year hibernation.
Right. I know you had talked about there's a big difference in the ending of the book and the ending we see on screen here. Tell us a little bit about that, because I've never read the book, and you said there's a pretty difference in the ending. So explain that a little bit to me.
In the book, it never talks about kids floating down there. Obviously, Pennywise still says we all float down here, but he says that because of the deadlights, and that whenever you get sucked up, you float into space. I don't believe there's a section where you actually see all the people that have died floating down in the sewers. And also, in the book, the house is not the hub of it's not where you get into the sewer drain to go see Pennywise. You get to the sewer drain in the book through the Barrens, and the house is still there, but Pennywise uses it as kind of like a haunted house in one section of the book, but it's not like where he lives or anything. Now, it has been a while since I've read the book. I could be getting some of the details wrong, but I do know that the Barrens is where Pennywise lives in the sewers, and so that's where you enter into the sewers through the Barrens, and that you don't have a scene where you see the floating kids. It's you see the floating, or you never see the floating kids. He says that we all float down here because he's the deadlights, and you float into the deadlights.
Really? See, I didn't know anything about the deadlights, so I've learned another thing today. But
yeah, that's a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I did not know Stephen King connected his books like this. I think that's awesome, and it's made me curious to want to read a lot of his books. Are hard to read. I'm not going to lie. I've tried to read them, and they're just he takes 5 pages just to describe one single smell, but he's very thorough. He can make you smell gasoline while you're reading, but he's hard to read. But I think I'm gonna give it another try, especially on it, because I think it's awesome. But they end up figuring out that. Go ahead.
Well,
I was going to say they end up figuring out that Pennywise feeds off their fear, and they ultimately. I don't think they don't kill Pennywise. They guess they put him back into hibernation, or her back into hibernation. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And then they all make a pact that if Pennywise ever comes back, they have to come back and fight him again. So that's how the movie ends till we get ready to go on to chapter 2. So what's your guys' take on this, Daniel? You was going to say something, so what was you going to say, buddy?
Oh, I was just going to say that Stephen King is always putting different characters from different books in his different books, and there's all kinds of little crossover things and Easter eggs and stuff, and that's one of the main things that I really, really like about reading it. Like, I was reading a short story that he wrote about Salem's Lot, and these people goes back to Jerusalem's Lot. They are kind of passing through, and they get stranded overnight in Jerusalem's Lot. And the town itself makes an appearance in the stories. I really like how he does all that stuff, with Christine showing up, and
Yeah, that's great, man. I never knew that.
You got all these different people. But no, man, I've always thought that was cool. So go ahead. That's
Cade, you've been quiet tonight, buddy. How do you think it ended, and what do you think is going to happen in part 2?
Yeah, so I was a huge fan of the way that it ended. I thought that it really, starting to reveal more of what Pennywise really is. Of course, we see the deadlights for the first time, and if you don't know anything about that, you're just kind of like, what's happening? But it really starts to unravel, who he is, and to show like all the kids fighting back against him. Especially, we see Billy talking to Pennywise in a form of Georgie, because he is shapeshifter, and it's a really cool emotional scene, because it even kind of convinces you yourself, thinking, oh, is Georgie somehow alive? And then all of a sudden Billy's like, oh, that's cool, but you're not him, and literally shoots him in the head with the bolt gun that Mike gave
That
him.
would take a lot of guts to do that.
And another cool thing here is Mike notes that it's not loaded. So, Billy pulls that gun out and shoots him with it, but because at this point, Billy's no longer afraid of Pennywise, it damages him. And then you go through that whole entire scene where they're beating up Pennywise, and as Pennywise, faces each kid, he changes form to their fear, just trying, with everything he's got to, get them to be afraid so that he can be effective. And I thought it was super cool. They beat him up to the point where he goes into the other well, and he's just kind of sitting there hanging on. You start to see some of his body, forming away, but he just utters. And Bill, I don't know, we haven't really talked about it that much, but the actor who played it here, Pennywise, he did a phenomenal job. Like, this guy was menacing.
Absolutely
the smile,
phenomenal job.
Bill
his eyes, like,
is an
yes,
awesome actor.
shout out to this guy. Like, he was actually able, like, his eyes, the way that he can actually like separate his eyes, like, it's a talent that he has, and he was
that
perfect.
was real?
Yeah, that was real.
No,
that
that's
was real.
one of the biggest reasons why he got the part, because he was in there reading for the part, and he did that with his eyes, and it really impressed the director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the way that he delivered, as Pennywise, he's super menacing throughout the movie. He did a great job, but you see him hanging on by a thread there, and all of a sudden he looks at all the kids and says, "Fear," and then just drops down, and you're just like, "What just happened?" Like, you don't really know like what that means. Of course, what chapter 2 entails. I've actually seen the movie, but it's been a long time. But yeah, the feeling that I had watching that movie in theaters, it was crazy, because especially at that time, people were actually roaming around as clowns, and there was a clown in the theater beside me watching that movie.
Nice.
And I was freaked out. It was crazy.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, at the end of It Chapter 1, whenever the kids got the upper hand, one of the catalysts of that was when Beverly was down there by herself with It, and he was going to kill her. He had his mouth open and everything, and she wasn't afraid. And he kind of was taken aback a little bit, and it kind of messed with him because he kind of lost the upper hand. That's when he opened his mouth, and she looked into the deadlights, and then her eyes rolled back and everything. But she would have been dead. She would just have been another victim if she would have shown fear right there. So that, I think, right there is kind of the catalyst of how the kids back in chapter 1, how they defeated him. I think that's kind of the catalyst on how they got the upper hand.
Yep. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Brent, you got anything to add before we rate this puppy?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit before we leave about Pennywise. I think Pennywise. I mean, wouldn't you guys say that Pennywise has to be one of the best horror movie villains like ever? Like
Absolutely.
to me, he's just like a perfect horror because even if you're not scared of clowns, he can transform into whatever your biggest fear is.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's terrified. She's terrifying, whatever it is. It's terrifying. And I'll tell you, the actor that this Pennywise in the 2017 version took this character into a direction to where it is now one of the iconic, horror movie figures, where I don't think, Tim Curry's version really was. He was kind of more comical, still spooky in his own way, but the 2017 Pennywise took Pennywise into a direction that just made him right there with the Voorheeses and the Freddys and the Myers. He is now one of the top dogs, in my opinion. And that's just because of the way this actor portrayed him, man. He done that good of a job.
Yeah, and especially when you know the lore, especially with all the knowledge that Brent has, that hopefully one day we can do an episode on it. Knowing that this monster chose to go to Derry all those millions of years ago because of children being there, the ability to go and eat off of fear. I mean, he's ruthless, and all the scenes where he is like manipulating people, especially the one that sticks out. I didn't get to mention this earlier, but it was one of the bullies. He goes into the sewer and he sees all of the disfigured children. That scene,
that was a great scene.
That scene is crazy. So yeah, you got to give props to him, man. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, and one last thing, you have to give a shout out to Stephen King because to come up with the idea of clowns living in a sewer drain, he came up with
That's
the idea
insane.
because he was going for a jog and he saw a sewer drain and he thought, how creepy would it be if a hand shot out of here, grabbed my ankle, and I looked down and it's a clown. And he came up with the whole story of it after just that. I mean,
who even thinks that way, man? That's just crazy.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Brent. Yeah. I don't know if this is alluded to in the book. The very beginning of the movie, you don't see her at all, but you do see Billy and Georgie's mom. She's playing some song on the piano. Is she significant anyway? But you see her briefly. Does she play any role in the books, or is she just like a background character?
Well, she's kind of a background character. You see her after Georgie dies. The parent, they don't really talk to Bill anymore. And so, she doesn't really. I think he talks more about his dad than he does about his mom. But it is a little strange how he doesn't really talk about her at all after her playing the piano.
Yeah, that was. I thought there'd be something significant about that song.
That's very significant, or that's very similar to what happened in The Body. So in The Body, kind of the main character. His older brother was killed in a car accident, and his mom and dad pretty much just started ignoring him after his older brother was killed. And so that is very similar to kind of what happened in that story.
Yeah, and it may say something about I think Georgie may have been learning to play the piano.
Yeah.
And so it has some ties with that about his mom teaching him how to play the piano. But no, she didn't play a huge part, but she played a bigger part than she did in the movie.
And did you guys catch, this is a little bit later on in the film, where Richie is kind of having his encounter with Pennywise, the room full of clowns? You actually see Tim Curry's as one of the clowns in that room. Yeah, super cool callback there. Yeah, that was a super cool callback.
You have to have that shout out.
Tim Curry, they did that in a really, really cool way.
Bill Skarsgård did. Tim Curry set the mold to break, and Bill Skarsgård broke that mold. But in order for there to have even been a mold, Tim Curry had to set that mold. And I am a huge Tim Curry fan.
Taking nothing from his character that he portrayed. Like I said, he had his own scary in his own way. but I do think the 2017 version is better, but still taking nothing from Tim Curry, he done a great job as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
All right, well, it's that time of the show where we're going to rate this puppy and let everybody know what we think about it overall. So, Brent, tell everybody how we're going to rate this movie.
All right, so just like our other reviews, we're going to have 5 categories. We're going to rate each category based out of 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. So the 5 categories are cultural significance, special effects, music or soundtrack, symbolism, and enjoyment. Once you have rated all 5 categories, 1 through 5, we take the average, and whatever your average number is, that is the overall score for the movie.
All right, sounds good. Daniel, why don't you go first tonight?
All right, so I'll kick us off with it. So for cultural significance, I give it a 3. A 3 is average, okay? But it may sound like I'm kind of beating it up a little bit by giving it a 3, but you have to remember this is the 2017 version. The book has been out forever. The original movie came out in 1990. Okay, so it's many years later. They weren't really doing anything new with it, and there's already a cult following going for the movie. With as good as the movie was, it really wasn't bringing anything brand new to the table to really continue on everything. So I just give it an average score of 3. Okay. The symbolism, dude, there are tons of Easter eggs in this movie. And, we've talked about several ones, talk about the turtle. There's several turtle references in it. There's the Tim Curry, in the clown room where Richie is. So there's tons of symbolism in it. I give it a 5. Special effects, I mean, just the Georgie scene alone with him getting his arm ripped off.
Yeah, baby.
That's worthy of a 5 right there. I could just keep on going, but the special effects for this movie is a 5 with the budget. I mean, it's easy. The music, I give it another average score, 3. I don't necessarily remember the music being a big factor in this movie, especially with it being set in the 80s. I would have really liked to hear more than just New Kids on the Block, But, I give it an average score of 3 for that one. And the overall enjoyment, man, I love this movie. That's a 5 hands down for me. So my total score for it is going to be a 4.2.
That sounds awesome, man. Cade, you're up, buddy. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so we've only been watching good movies on this channel, so this is going to be another highly rated movie. But
we
yeah,
do need to rate a sucky movie eventually.
we need to watch something that's like some
crap movie in
because we're watching The Shining and this, so I hate to I like to rank these movies, but starting with cultural significance here, I gave this one a 4. The reason why I'm giving this one a 4, I can remember back in 2017 when this came out. I mean, everybody was losing their minds about this movie. There were people dressing up as clowns, walking around the streets. I mean, there were clowns in Athens. There was a clown in the movie theater with me watching the movie. So I think that it drew a large crowd. And so I'm going to give that one a 4. From there, special effects, kind of like what Daniel mentioned before. I mean, the Georgie scene, the CGI with how he transforms into everybody's fear. I mean, they did such a good job with showing the monstrous side of Pennywise. That gives me a 5 for special effects. Music, I'm kind of in the same boat as Daniel there as well. I thought that the soundtrack was pretty cool at times. Nothing you're really going to take home and remember. But I gave that one a 3, just a good average score. Symbolism, of course. I mean, if I just wish I had the knowledge inside my head that Brent does right now, because the universe that Stephen King has created, especially with it, transcending to other novels and other stories. I mean, that's so cool to me, and all the callbacks in this movie, that makes me give this a 5. And of course, overall enjoyment, I'm gonna give this a 5. This movie's awesome. I could watch it several times a year. I think I've watched it every year since it's come out. And I just enjoy it a lot. So that's a 5, and with all those scores average, that gives me a 4.4 out of 5.
All right, it's tracking pretty good so far. Brent, I'm gonna go next, man, and we're just gonna save you for the end since you're the aficionado of the Stephen King universe.
It's aficionado, baby.
Yeah, the
Man.
aficionado. So for myself, I'm gonna go cultural significance. I won't give it a 5 just because, anybody can look at a clown, you think Pennywise. That's just my opinion on it. Symbolism, I'll give it a 4. Now that we've had this podcast and I know all this other stuff about the whole universe, I'd probably bump it up to a 5. But for now, I'm giving it a 4 because, I think it was, from what I knew, it had a lot of symbolism in it as far as the Easter eggs and stuff he puts in it. Special effects, I'll give it a 4. I thought the movie looked well, but still some of the CGI stuff, I'm just not a fan of CGI, and some of that stuff can just look fake. But I thought overall the movie looked good, so I'll give it a 4. Music, I'll give it a 3 because, just like Daniel said, I don't remember the music being much of a factor in this movie, but I'm sure it was good. I mean, because it was a good movie. So I'll give the movie or the music a 3. Overall enjoyment, I'll give it a 5 because, you've got a clown that turns into a spider that kills kids. How can you go wrong with that? So I'll give overall enjoyment a 5. So that leaves my score. When you divide it all out and do all the arithmetic and all the Albert Einstein stuff, it comes out to a 4.2. So we're still tracking pretty good for this movie. So now we go on to the master himself, Brent. Please give us your evaluation of this movie, good sir.
I'm definitely not the master, but I do love Stephen King. I love the book, and I love the movie too. This is a great movie. For cultural significance, I gave it a 5. I understand what Dad was talking about. I wasn't even thinking about it this way, about comparing this particular movie to the old movie and to the book. I was just kind of looking at this as a whole. It is very culturally significant. I mean, you see Pennywise everywhere. Just the whole being scared of sewer drains, that comes out of this movie. I know that being scared of clowns, that fear obviously was before it, but it really came on the it really put the fear of clowns on the map, to the point where now people are scared of clowns pretty often because of this movie. But about this particular movie, like Corky mentioned earlier, I think Bill Skarsgård really put Pennywise as a character on the map a lot more than the Curry adaptation did. So I gave it a 5 for cultural significance. For special effects, I gave it a 3, kind of because of what Corky was talking about. There were some scenes that I thought the special effects could have been a little bit better on. I'm probably in the minority on this, but I don't really like the way that Pennywise opens his mouth in this movie. Definitely whenever he bites Georgie, like his mouth kind of opens in a very cartoonish way. I love the scene, but I'm just talking about when he bites his mouth, his arm, it was a little off. But special effects as a whole, you can't really dock it too much because you've got just Pennywise as himself. I count that as special effects. I mean, I think he looks fantastic. You've got the house, but I give it a 3. Music, I give it a 2 because, again, with what Dad was saying, they could have had an awesome soundtrack. You're basing this in the 80s. You could have had an awesome soundtrack, or you could have created a theme song or like a theme music for it, so you could play like Halloween block parties and stuff. You didn't get that with this movie, and you pretty much just get New Kids on the Block is the only 80s music.
That's true.
The whole movie, so I give it a 2. For symbolism, I gave it a 3, and let me explain why. I gave it a 3 because the movie doesn't get very deep into the actual symbolism but behind everything. You have some callbacks to the turtle and to the water tower. Like whenever Bill is riding his bike, you see the big water tower. But I kind of think those are more Easter eggs for fans. It doesn't really dive into it. I can't remember if part 2 dives into it, so if it does, then that score is going to boost up. But for this movie in particular, it doesn't really dive into it. And then as far as symbolism, like, like The Shining had symbolism for, like, it was like symbolism galore, whereas this particular movie, it doesn't really get into the Stephen King side of the symbolism, and then it also doesn't have the symbolism of, like The Shining does. So I gave it a 3. But overall enjoyment, I gave it a 4. I love this movie. It's a great movie. I could have boosted it up to a 5 if, like, the special effects was better and the music was better. I think it could have been a 5. The book is my favorite book of all time. I would have given it a 5 out of 5 for sure. And the symbolism, I would have gave it a 5 as well, just because you see all of these things kind of come together. You see Christine, everything. But for this movie, I give it a 4, and that gives it a score of 3.4 for my overall score.
So what's that average out? I think it's going to average out to be about a 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll
Should be about a 4, yeah.
Yeah, so it averages out to be a 4. Well, you've heard it here, guys. We think the movie's pretty good. We recommend it to everybody. It gets a 4 out of 5 from all of us here at Remember That. And for me, Daniel, Kate, and Brent, we appreciate everybody listening to us. Please like and share and comment and, share our episode. Get us out there. We're a fairly new podcast, and we're just trying to get our feet wet. We appreciate everybody listening to us. Our last episode, The Shining, is doing very well as far as downloads go. So thanks to everybody that liked and commented on that episode and listened to it. We really appreciate it. And from all of us here, Remember That. We'll see you next week, and see you later. Bye.
See you, bye.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. We got it all. Tune in, turn up, come by with us, y'all. So remember.